Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday. We are looking back at the divisional weekend that was and a little bit of news out of the NFL. Dennis is out today, but don't adjust that set. It is Matt Squared reunited, and it feels so good.
It really does. It has been it's been a minute since I've been able to jump on and talk some NFL, so I'm excited. It was really good games this weekend. We've got some pretty interesting news nuggets to talk about. I promise I'm not going to flip out too much on one of these that we're going to talk about. So yeah, I'm excited to be back.
Well, and it's fitting that that you're back for this because the first big piece of news is Bill O'Brien won't be around to crush the hopes and dreams of Patriots fans anymore, because he will be crushing the hopes and dreams of Ohio State fans as their new offensive coordinator. There wasn't a lot of discussion about how many, if any, of Bill's assistants would stay in New England. There's rumors that his sons have been offered to continue on. Bill O'Brien definitely moving on to Ohio State. Do you like the fit there?
I don't hate it, but I don't love it. Obviously, you could question how good he has been in the NFL, kind of as, I would say, more of a GM than a play caller, because he was successful in Houston. I mean, he, in a way, turned that franchise around. Sure, you can say some of that was Deshaun Watson, but I would argue every good team has a good quarterback. Outside of like the moves and the trades that he made, I thought he did a really good job in Houston. In college, he has been better than I think he overall gets credit for. He turned around a Penn State team that had, for the most part, gotten kind of the college football death penalty after the Joe Pa and all the scandal with that, and made them into a very formidable team with the likes of, I want to say it was Christian Hackenberg was his quarterback at the time, who ended up, I believe, getting second-round draft capital. So, I mean, that's not that for a guy who we saw in the NFL was really not
on
that
the
good.
Jets.
Yeah, I mean, look, like he wasn't that good. Now, the last couple of years in Alabama, it wasn't great, but it actually wasn't as bad as people think it was. I mean, he was passing in like a 50 to 55% rate in neutral and early down situations, but his success rate was at 50 and then upwards of almost 60% at time. And that's actually pretty good. The explosiveness lacked a little bit in those offenses as well, though. A lot of it seemed to be like kind of short dink and dunk stuff. It was right around the neutral or average line for coaches is 1.5. So he's going to have right around, I would say, maybe even more talent at Ohio State than he had at times in Alabama. But you look at what Bryce Young was able to do. I mean, I know it's a weird situation because I think it was in 10 seasons with Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, he never won a national championship or a Super Bowl, kind of something both those coaches are very well known for and respected for in their areas of work. So that's definitely not a good look. But overall, I think it's going to be fine because the talent around him, it's just going to be interesting to see. I mean, Ohio State has an incredible team around them. Will he be the reason that they are not good? I don't think so. I think the talent's going to be able to overcome that. I don't think he's going to be that bad. I'll put it that way. I think he's going to be fine. It's not as thrilling as, say, Ryan Day calling plays for Ohio State, but also Ryan Day and Ohio State have lost to Michigan 3 years in a row and have yet to win a national championship, and they just watched Michigan do it a couple weeks ago. So I think they're doing everything and anything they can to try and change course. We'll see what happens. I don't hate it. Don't love it.
He might have better players than he had in New England. I remember, last offseason we were mildly excited about him coming to New England. I thought it was going to be good for Mac Jones, who now might not even really have an NFL career, so to speak.
Yeah.
But New England's offense was dreadful. I don't know that I blame that all on him. They never really got receivers. Ramondre got injured. Mac Jones, though, looked like he fell off a cliff. And so I think that would be the only worrying thing for me, because Ohio State's definitely having to break in a new quarterback. And previously, it seemed like Bill O'Brien was pretty good working with quarterbacks. But what you saw with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi this year, maybe not the highest bar he had to work with, but it did not look great.
Yeah.
Next up, a couple of coaching news. It seems like the Titans are closing in on finalizing a contract with Brian Callahan to be their head coach. He was the offensive coordinator for Cincinnati. Obviously, they have a young quarterback in Will Levis. We don't know what pieces. It certainly seemed like the way the season ended that Derrick Henry is planning to be gone. A lot of rumors that DeAndre Hopkins could be gone. Don't know what they're going to have to work with, but how do you feel about that potential fit?
Yeah, I mean, I like it when we typically see teams do this. You go from a head coach like Mike Vrabel, who is very stern, defensive-minded head coach, to now you flip it, more of a player's coach, offensive-minded guy. It'll be fun to see. I wonder if, I wouldn't hate it if maybe we saw Jake Browning follow him over from Cincinnati and maybe be more talented than Will Levis. I was watching, I think it was NFL Live today. They were talking about how actually – granted, I think it was a down season overall for Joe Burrow, but they were talking about how good Jake Browning was in that offense this year compared to Joe Burrow, and he was actually better than him in like most statistical categories.
Hey, maybe he can get T. Higgins too, because
maybe there you go, the start of a new budding Titans offense. I mean, I think obviously right now that you have to think that division runs through the Texans with what they did this year, especially on a year that I don't think any of us expected them to be that good.
I mean, Texans, Jaguars, Colts have all taken massive steps forward the last 2 years, and then there's Tennessee.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. I think it's a good thing. We've seen, obviously, the past couple of years, the NFL has been moving more toward offensive heavy anyways. There's not as many defensive-minded head coaches still in the game. Interestingly enough, D'Amico Ryans, who won the division, is one of them and is succeeding. But I think it's going to be fun. We'll see how well it works out. I personally don't think Will Levis, I mean, he had like one good game. I think he was mediocre in another and then kind of really bad in the other. So we'll see if Callahan can kind of turn him around and turn him into what a lot of people hoped he would be. I don't necessarily see that, but it's going to be tough going. I mean, if you're really relying your entire offense is going to be right now Will Levis and Tajay Spears, like I'm not feeling good about his chances of turning the Titans around anytime soon.
Well, and you have Treylon Burks for that 6 quarters he's available.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Last piece of coaching news. The Raiders made it official, hiring Antonio Pierce, who was their interim coach this year. Was very popular with the players, seemed to be, kind of a very popular choice. So he gets a full-time gig. They're also closing in on signing Tom Telesco at GM, who was the GM of the Chargers that got fired. I don't know how I feel about that, but I was kind of happy for Antonio Pierce. A couple of years ago, the Raiders had a really good interim coach in Rich Bisaccia, and they kind of tossed him over for a bigger name, and that did not pan out. Do you think that played in a little bit to listening to the players and listening to what was happening this time?
I think so. I think it had to have, right? I mean, we even kind of talked about that. We thought he deserved a shot to keep that job. And what Antonio Pierce has done this year, I think, has been incredible. He's really turned that team around, a team that with Aiden O'Connell as well, a quarterback, which I don't think anybody was expecting to be
who
that
might
good.
Still be the quarterback.
Exactly. Yeah.
Apparently.
So I think it's well deserved. He definitely earned it. I actually don't mind the hire of Telesco, because if you look at what he's done in the drafts, I think he's actually drafted fairly well for the Chargers. He's just made really bad coaching hires. So, I mean, the fact that they are making the hire of Antonio Pierce now, although you don't always love that either, right? You don't love the arranged marriages of like the coach is hired before the GM because it's not one of his guys. But clearly the team wanted Pierce there. They played well for him. The Raiders look great toward the end of the season. I will be curious to see what they do next year, because I also think we see this happen quite often. So like the The most recent one that I'll use, at least that I know that failed, was like Freddie Kitchens in Cleveland, where comes in and everybody loves what he's doing. They bring him back, and then it was just a massive failure the year after. I don't think that will happen here, but I do think you probably need to have a better quarterback than Aiden O'Connell. But I think Pierce is, at least from what we saw in a limited sample size, was really good at preparing the team, getting them ready every single week. Was a great leader. So I'm excited to see what the Raiders look like next year. I think they got it right.
I will say Tom Telesco got kind of bounced out, and that loss to the Raiders was embarrassing. And we long thought Brandon Staley needed to go.
Yeah, like 2 years
But
ago.
I would say the Chargers have brought in and put together some pretty impressive rosters the last 3 or 4 years. They didn't always perform well, but they had some of the pieces. So maybe, if that's all he needs to do, maybe he can rehab them. The Raiders are going to have cap issues. They have questions. Jacobs likely not going to be back, was on that franchise tag. So you have Zamir White. Don't know what happens with Devontae Adams. He didn't seem happy for a while, but seems to have gotten better with Aiden O'Connell. It seems like they're kind of screwed with the Jimmy G contract.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons it may be Aiden O'Connell, because you may have to roll forward with the quarterbacks you have. So I think there's still some questions. Be interesting to see what kind of magic he can work for them. Hopefully not too much magic, since I would prefer they not catch up to Denver. Let's move on to the divisional round games. And if the wild card weekend was completely underwhelming with one good game out of 6, we actually got 4 good games this weekend. The second half of the first game we're going to talk about got a little out of hand, but Texans Ravens was 10-10 at the half. Was very competitive. The Ravens were able to put it away at the end, what you might expect from a number 1 seed against a young team, getting that 31-10 victory. But the Texans had a pretty magical season. You just mentioned a minute ago, you think that they could be kind of the team to beat going forward. They got their guy in Stroud. You really like Nico Collins. Tank Dell looked great, as presuming he comes back from injury. They have a good young defensive core, good coaching. What do you think they should focus on this offseason?
Linebacker and running back is kind of where I would say they really need to shore things up. Now, it's easy to say that when, Lamar Jackson is running wild on you. I don't know any. I wouldn't say any. There's probably a handful of linebackers that could QB spy Lamar Jackson and probably not limit him to less than 100-yard rushing, but at least limit him. Lamar was in his bag. That's just one of those games, kind of like we'll talk about later, obviously, with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Like, sometimes Patrick Mahomes just has magic, and you can't stop it. And Lamar can be that player, too. We've seen it. Now, we've never seen him do it in the playoffs, so it was kind of cool to finally see him flip that switch in the playoffs, because he's always seemed to kind of struggle. He always does it in the regular season. We finally got to see him get going here in the playoffs. But for me, I think their biggest weakness is obviously the running game. Like, no shot at Devin Singletary and those guys. I thought that they did well this year, but like if they could get that true, maybe not bell cow, but like that guy they could lean on a little bit more, the guy they can trust to get those big yards in short situations, take a little bit off of CJ Stroud's shoulders. I think that would be good for them. And then linebacker as well, just to kind of help with that defense. Because I actually like their secondary and I like their front. I thought they played really well this year.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they can get maybe one of the bigger free agent backs. They don't have a first round pick this year, I think, because of the trade up. But could you imagine like a Josh Jacobs or a Derrick Henry kind of going there? That would give them kind of the power back there. Dameon Pierce really faded out. This is by the end only returning kicks. I'm with you. I could see them bringing back Singletary on some kind of a cap friendly deal. He has like his role and his skills, but it would be interesting to see them with a little more defined running game. And it would be fascinating if Derrick Henry moved across conference.
Oh, yeah. He's got to go up and gets to go play the Titans twice a year.
For the Ravens, you mentioned pretty exciting. They have not hosted an AFC championship game in a long, long time. This for Lamar Jackson could be his chance to take that step. He spent a lot of last offseason campaigning for himself, betting on himself. He gets that contract. Looks like he's going to be the regular season MVP. If he makes it all the way through the Super Bowl, that would be a big step. What are you expecting from them in this championship game?
I'm expecting him to do a lot of what he did against the Texans. I mean, we saw in that game, again, we'll talk about here in a couple of minutes, the Chiefs-Bills. The Chiefs were having trouble stopping Josh Allen at times on the ground. Lamar Jackson is a more dynamic rushing athlete than Josh Allen. So I think that is going to be fun to watch. Obviously, watching him pass the ball against this team as well. I think he's got to put this team on his shoulders. You have the home game, so you're going to have that home cooking. I think a lot of that stuff was overblown over the past week that, Patrick Mahomes has never played on the road in a playoff game. He's played on the road in a lot of tough situations during the regular season. Like he can play on the road. I think they should have lost that game anyways. We'll talk about that later. I just think Lamar has got to, again, I know, because this is the worst AFC matchup in the world for me. I don't want either team to win. I'd prefer it if can we just get
Amen.
Can we just get San Francisco versus the Lions 2 weeks in a row? Can we get in the NFC Championship and then again in the Super Bowl? Because I'd be happy if either one of them won. So yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of the team is going to have to be on Lamar's back again to see if he can carry him to the Super Bowl for the first time since. Is it Ray Lewis?
No, Flacco. They won.
Oh, that's right, Flacco.
They went, and they beat the 40. No, they lost. Yeah, they beat the 49ers.
Yeah, they beat the 49ers. Jim Harbaugh's 49ers. Yeah, that was the lights.
That was the Brother Bowl.
Yeah.
But it's been over a decade.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
been a minute. Because I was thinking, I'm like, oh, Lamar could go back to the Super Bowl. I'm like, wait, he wasn't the quarterback when they went to the Super Bowl. So it should be interesting. I'm with you. Like from a personal standpoint, the only team that I like less than the Chiefs is the Ravens. I don't really know who to root for. I guess, I had a fun back and forth with my friend Matt during the weekend. If we would have had a drinking game about how many times they were going to mention and or show Taylor Swift during the Chiefs game, I think we would have both been passed out by the half. And just also knowing that we're going to get Nance and Romo calling the Super Bowl, if we have them plus the Chiefs, I don't know how bearable that's going to be for 4.5 hours. I'll definitely be watching movie trailers at the commercials.
Yep.
The second game on Saturday was the other number one seed, San Francisco 49ers. They did not look rock solid. They do pull up the 24-21 victory over the Packers, but the Packers came out and ran the ball well. Aaron Jones found the fountain of youth, kind of, where was that when we needed it during the fantasy season, friends? But I want to talk about Jordan Love. A lot has been made. Some people have gone so far as to say he should be the number 1 or 2 quarterback in Dynasty. I think he had a great season. I think he deserves to vault up some rankings. I don't know that I'm ready to have him top 3. Are you?
No, I still have Mahomes, Allen, and even though Jalen Hurts wasn't great this year, I still think he deserves to be right up there toward the top.
Lamar and Herbert.
Lamar deserves it. Burrow, Herbert. Yeah, I mean, look, man, maybe I'm holding.
It's when you get to the range of for me, Dak to CJ Stroud. I can see where you're making a case for Love, but he's gonna have to do it for me more than 1 year.
Yeah, I think for me, I still, again, maybe I was gonna say maybe this is a little bit of my bias coming in here. I still think Justin Fields deserves to be up there a little bit. I think we didn't get to see a full season out of Deshaun Watson. I'm trying to pull up where was because I know he was top 10. Where did Jordan Love finish in fantasy points?
I'll look that up real quick.
I could have swore he was near the top, but now I can't. There we go. Here we go.
Yeah, he's 5. He finished
5. Okay, that's what I'm about to say. It was not pulling up for me for some reason. So I still think, like I said, Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Herbert, Burrow. I'm probably having all of them over him for sure. So he's got to be top 10. Even if you want to slot him in at 6, 7, 8, I think that's fair. He had a much better season than I expected. Got to give the kid credit. Now, I think we should also say it's not unfair to say he had a much better fantasy season. There were times he didn't look like a great NFL quarterback throughout the year. I mean, think about the Packers really were practically almost eliminated from the playoffs until they went on that run toward the end of the year. So that had a lot to do with it. They did look good against that San Francisco team, but I definitely think he deserves to be top 10.
Yeah, they definitely hit a wall, I think, the Packers in the middle of the season, but they seem to right themselves to go on a stretch. I'll be curious to see how they do next year. I liked what I saw The 49ers, meanwhile, I didn't think Brock Purdy was terrible. He wasn't incredible. But one of the problems they had, Deebo Samuel going out in that game, shoulder injury. It's fortunately not broken, which means he has a good chance of playing in this game. They were notably 0-3 and had that 3-game losing streak when he was out during the middle of the season. If he can't go, how much of a blow would that be for the 49ers?
I mean, I think it would be a massive blow when you're going up against a very good Detroit Lions defense. You bring in a guy like Deebo Samuel who you can use all over the field. I mean, he is literally the jack of all trades. But I think that's almost an insult to him because everybody says a jack of all trades is like you're good at everything, not great at anything. I think he is actually a great wide receiver. But being able to use him in the run game, even as a distraction at times, to be able to do those quick screens, whether it's to Brandon Ayuk or then flip the field and get it to Christian McCaffrey, like he just brings a completely different dynamic to this offense. And I think it helps a Brock Purdy to have those kind of weapons. So I still think, in my opinion, they are the clear number one team in the NFC. I think they are not heads above better than Detroit, but they are better than Detroit. But losing Deebo Samuel, I mean, that might almost level the field and make Detroit, like I said, whoever wins that game is who I'll be rooting for in the Super Bowl. I think there's a realistic shot the Lions have a chance to do it, especially if Deebo is out.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised, even with Deebo out, that we didn't see more from Brandon Ayuk in that game against the Packers. I don't know if it was the coverages or what, but it seemed like he was locked more in on Kittle and Jawan Jennings. Yeah. Kind of fascinating game flow. It's also something to be said. Brock Purdy, I guess, has struggled consistently over the last couple of years when it rains. So California got to be hoping that it's a nice day. Detroit's probably hoping it's a nice day too, since they have to go outside. Speaking of the Lions, they got to host their second straight playoff game and got their second straight playoff victory. A 31-23 win over Tampa Bay was a pretty decent game. I thought Baker played pretty well, got them in there. I want to have two questions for you. First, when Detroit gets that touchdown to pull, presumably within one score, and they elected to go for two, in my mind, that made absolutely no sense, and missing it seemed to let some of the air out of the sails. And second, Baker obviously signed that 1-year prove-it deal, had career highs, completion percentage, yardage, touchdowns. Do you think he's back in Tampa Bay?
So on the 2-point conversion, I didn't have an issue with it. I know they talked a little bit about it on the coverage as well. It's one of those things where, because like they needed to make one, I think, right? Or if they would have,
they were only down 14 points.
How did they describe it? If they would have gotten it, then they only had to go down the field and score a touchdown and they win the game, though. So you don't have to go into overtime. I don't mind that. I like the gutsy call because I know this is if and buts, is candy nuts, all that other stuff. But if they do get it and then they drive down the field and score, we're talking about what's a gutsy call that was by Tom.
It was a butsy win too.
It was a butsy one. Yeah. What a gutsy call that was to do that. So I don't have an issue with it. We talk about that all the time, right? It's one of those things where, like, if it works out for you, we talk about how great you are. And when it doesn't, you're like, oh, that was such a bad idea. I get it on the point of, like, you wanting to tie the game. But I think if they do complete it there, then you feel like all the momentum has swung in Tampa Bay's favor at that point. Because you're like, holy crap, like, they're actually making this comeback. And then even on that final drive, when they get it back, and you're sitting there, obviously Baker throws the interception on the first play, which is not great. But when they get the ball, you're sitting there like, oh my God, Tampa Bay could actually knock off Detroit. And here we go, sad sack Lions, and all that stuff's going to come out again. So I don't mind it. I think Baker played more than well enough to be the starter for Tampa Bay.
I think he's going to be a starter somewhere. I just wonder if they're going to be the ones to get it done or if somebody else will make a move for him.
I mean, where else could he go? Does he go to the Raiders?
Have you seen how horrendous the quarterback landscape is in the NFL?
But
there's only like 8 teams that you probably would say feel rock solid and say they wouldn't be looking for someone.
The bottom teams, though, like he ain't going back to Carolina. I mean, there were the pictures of them having him play D-end on the practice team at times. He's not going back to Carolina. I don't think he's going to New England, Arizona, Washington. The Chargers have a quarterback. Trying to go down, man, maybe Tennessee. Who knows? That Tennessee's one place. I don't know what the Giants are doing with Daniel Jones. I really don't. I mean, I guess we could throw him there. The Jets, they've got Rodgers. I think they won't. Who knows what's going on with Atlanta? I think Chicago's probably drafting a quarterback. Like, to me, he's talked about how much he's loved playing in Tampa Bay this year. It's the first time, at least me, a massive Baker fan. It's the first time he's really talked about loving playing somewhere since being in Cleveland in the early years. Obviously, he didn't like what happened to him. And, just throw this out here. I tweeted it out, and unfortunately, then I ended up cursing because he threw an interception literally like a minute after I tweeted that out. How insane it would have been if you were a Browns fan to watch Baker Mayfield possibly go to a Super Bowl after you cut that dude, gave the largest contract in NFL history to a quarterback who's played like 10 games for you. Hope you feel good about yourself, Cleveland Browns front office, because
I was going to say Baker could end up back in Cleveland. They need a quarterback.
Not with the way they burned those bridges, and I think that's all on them what they did to Baker. To be honest with you, I don't think Baker. He hasn't necessarily handled it the best.
They want to keep Joe Flacco, which I wouldn't say you don't want to keep an insurance policy after the last 2 years. You're right, only 12 games from.
Just make sure we don't have any Monday night games. I don't even falling asleep on the bench anymore. But like outside of that, I'm cool keeping Joe cool in Cleveland. But yeah, I mean, I think he definitely deserves to be back in Tampa if he wants to go back and they want him. Because the other thing is, with how well he played, I think you've kind of played yourself out of the quarterback market, at least in the NFL draft, to lock up one of those rookies on a cheap deal. So if you can get Baker back,
they're still in somewhat cap purgatory, if I recall.
Yeah, so I think I don't know where else he would go. I mean, like I said, maybe the Titans. I think he could definitely start over Will Levis, but would you take him in Denver? They're low enough to probably get a rookie if they really want one. So,
speaking of teams that are going to be in cap hell, if they release Russell Wilson, they take an $87 million cap hit, the largest in the history of football.
It's a pretty good chunk of change.
I think Denver currently might be the worst managed franchise in the NFL. I'm also not that bullish on their coach, but that's a sad comparison time for another.
This is unfortunately you may not actually ask me to ever come back again after I'm about to say this, because I know this is gonna hurt you. I would say that the Dallas Cowboys are right up there with the Denver Broncos on worst run. They win a lot, but Jerry Jones really does like the least with the most there.
They're chronic underachievers, but at least they get to the playoffs and win during the regular season.
That's true.
I was thinking that classic Bills Kansas City game, Denver beat both those teams during the regular season, but then pulls out some like confounding losses, like getting the S kicked out of you by the Patriots at home on Christmas Day when you're watching with your father-in-law, who is taking sheer delight in watching your pain.
Great Christmas joy right there.
Moving on to people that know something about historical pain, that would be the Lions, who they won 2 playoff games in a year for the first time since 1957. We'll let that kind of wash over us for a minute. Made some news with Brock Wright, very questionable. They signed Zach Ertz. I didn't realize he wasn't on a team. Kind of a fascinating pickup, whether he plays or not. But, you mentioned we don't know what's going on with Debo. Obviously, the 49ers looked a little more vulnerable on Saturday. Detroit kind of playing in that zone. Jared Goff has plenty of experience, including taking a team to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
How are you feeling about Detroit?
I mean, it's hard not to like them. I mean, with that running game, Jared Goff has been, I hate to say a really good game manager because people take that such like a negative connotation, but like he's done such a good job of distributing the ball, not really having any turnovers in these games and just kind of doing what needs to be done. That defense has played really well. And that's where I think the game is going to come down to, because while San Francisco has a great defense as well, like I think the offense is kind of what everyone recognizes, especially that running game. Christian McCaffrey, I think for the most part could have been also talked about as MVP of the NFL with the season he had. Detroit can match San Francisco point for point. But without Deebo Samuel, can they focus in on Christian McCaffrey? Can they force Brock Purdy to beat you? Because I know everybody says we disrespect Brock Purdy, but like I think he is also very much a game manager. And if you take away, if one of your best weapons is out due to injury, and then you're able to take away another one in Christian McCaffrey, can Brock Purdy carry the San Francisco 49ers into a Super Bowl against a very, very good Detroit Lions team? Like, I think it's really going to come down to how well that defense plays, because I think the offense, with what Jared Goff has done, not even just as you mentioned, taking the Rams to a Super Bowl, but in these past 2 games against the Lions, I understand he hasn't been a Lions player, throughout his entire career, but you can't tell me he didn't understand the magnitude of those 2 games. He's been with Detroit. This is his 3rd season now, correct? Because the first season was bad. Then he's had last year.
He and Dan Campbell are pretty well kind of tied together, and I loved that. That game ball recognition after the first playoff win.
Yep. Yes, I mean, he, I think, fully understands the pressure that was not only on Dan Campbell, but like Jared Goff and everybody there, and he handled it very well in both games. Even that first game where, like, same thing as the Tampa Bay game, like, it looked like they might end up losing that game after being the better team the entire game. So I think that he's going to go win this level-headed. He has maybe, obviously, a little bit. No, wait, Kyle Shanahan was there. So he's played Kyle Shanahan. Now, different versions of this defense. DeMeco Ryan's gone. Robert Salah were the defensive coordinators when he was there, but he knows the 49ers, knows this team. Like, I hate that this is the morning matchup, because this is the game
this is the primetime matchup.
Oh, even better, because now I can enjoy my Sunday night. So
AFC is 3 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah.
And NFC is 6:30 p.m. Eastern.
Well, that works
perfect. In the afternoon.
That works perfect, because like I can avoid, because I don't care who wins the AFC game. I'm going to root against whoever makes it to the Super Bowl from there. Like, I'll watch it, but like if I get
CBS has the Super Bowl, so they have the early championship game. Fox gets the prime time.
That's all that matters, because like I didn't want to figure out what I was going to be doing with myself Sunday night, because I didn't really want to watch the Chiefs Ravens. So.
Well, and if nothing else, I hope for Jared Goff, a guy who got unceremoniously dumped by the Rams, traded to the Lions, and has endured every offseason since he's been there, them asking the question when they're going to draft an actual franchise quarterback. I hope at least this puts that to rest for a couple of years, because I think Jared Goff, I think it's what Dan Campbell said, you're good enough for Detroit. And he's been a great grounding presence while they've built a franchise up around him.
Yeah.
So I would be thrilled if they made it to a Super Bowl. Been thinking about it. We'll see how it goes.
I would and I wouldn't. I'd love to see them make it, because I have a lot of very good friends who are Detroit Lions fans, and it would be fun to see a team who hasn't won it, which is the Lions, because the Ravens, Chiefs, and 49ers have all won it, win that. But at the same time, if the Lions do that, then the Browns become like the sad sack team of the NFL, and I'm just not ready to bear that just yet. So.
I thought they said now the Dolphins are the ones that have the longest playoff drought.
Nobody cares about the Dolphins, so.
The final game of the weekend was in some ways the most competitive, and in other ways most heartbreaking. Kansas City getting the 27-24 victory in Buffalo, and then we had like 5 minutes of watching Buffalo Bills fans cry uncontrollably in the stands. My wife's like, "Are you going to get up or change the channel?" I'm like, "When I can emotionally maneuver myself, I sure will." We'll start with the Chiefs. They get a big win. They didn't always look good this season, but they kind of put it together down the stretch, and they've looked really good in their playoff games in a lot of phases of the game. They didn't actually play the Ravens this year during the season, but Lamar and Patrick Mahomes have played each other before. A couple of teams that should know each other pretty well. What do you like, or what do you think likes the wrong word? What are you expecting from the Chiefs as they go to their 6th straight AFC championship game?
Yep. Nope. I feel you there too. So let me just state this for the record, for the people who don't know. The only reason I don't care about this game, the Chiefs Ravens, is, as you just mentioned, let's just be honest. Unless you're a Chiefs fan, we were all rooting for the Chiefs to lose on Sunday night because we get tired of seeing people continuously win. Not that there's anything wrong with Patrick Mahomes. He's a nice man. I've met him. He's an incredible individual.
Look, even if they didn't advance, we'd see Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce on Sunday because they're in every other commercial.
Exactly. So he's doing just fine for himself, all right? Him not making an AFC championship is not going to hurt. And then obviously the Ravens side of things, it's not just because they're in the AFC North. It's because that is the old Cleveland Browns team. So, like, that's just seeing them possibly win another Super Bowl that should belong to the Cleveland Browns. So that's why I don't care who wins this game. But back to the Chiefs. I think they match up very well against the Ravens. Obviously, as you mentioned, they did play well down the stretch and played really well in the playoffs. Their defense has looked incredibly good. In fact, I would say their defense has been the best part of that team, where the previous 5 years, you could say, was actually the offense and Patrick Mahomes, which is scary because you could argue, I don't know if anybody disagrees with this argument, but like Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback right now in the NFL. So if you have the best quarterback in the NFL on the side of the ball that's not as good, I think you obviously have a chance to beat anybody and everybody. So I think they match it very well. The key, as I said earlier with Lamar, is going to be, we saw Josh Allen in a way kind of have his way when he needed to against that I was going to say the Patrick Mahomes defense, the Kansas City Chiefs defense, although he pretty much is mayor of Kansas City at this point. Against the Kansas City Chiefs defense, obviously Lamar Jackson, a lot more athletic, a lot more explosive than Josh Allen. So that I think is going to be the key matchup, is can that defense slow down Lamar in the rushing game? Because I think that secondary will be able to handle these weapons. There's not a wide receiver on the Ravens team that scares me if I'm the Kansas City Chiefs secondary.
I mean, I don't think there's a wide receiver on either team that scares anyone. I mean, I like what Rashee Rice did, but let's be honest, the best pass catcher,
Travis Kelce. I mean, I know he's not a receiver, but
well, then Mark Andrews, who will probably be active for this one. He was close to being active last week. I don't think anything short of having his legs amputated is going to stop him from getting activated for the AFC.
And you know what? Even if he had his legs amputated, he'd be better than all on the receivers on the Baltimore Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, you have some guys that occasionally pop. You know, we've seen some decent things from Zay Flowers and Rashee Rice, but those are young players. We occasionally saw MVS make a few catches. You occasionally see OBJ make a few catches, but I think this is really about the quarterbacks, the defenses, and then, you know, those two tight ends. Because Travis Kelce, after looking like he was on the struggle bus a little bit down the stretch of the regular season, has been pretty good in the playoffs. He dropped a few in that cold game against Miami, but he was on point in that divisional game against poor Buffalo. Speaking of Buffalo, I felt like this might actually be the year for them. They were 6-6 at one point in time in the middle of the season. They won 5 straight and looked like they were really coming together down the stretch. They finally got Kansas City at home in Buffalo, not having to go on the road, a team they had beaten in the regular season. They looked like they had that running game going. Just a couple of heartbreaking drops, you know, from Diggs, or pass not quite on target. It seemed like they went away from that power running game, you know, down the stretch, which was confounding. And then wide right for a Buffalo kicker. Once again, you know, the AFC East, some of those teams are getting stronger. We've seen other teams in the AFC rising up. Is the window, if not closing, at least narrowing for Buffalo?
I mean, I think you have to say yes. I mean, how long can you keep this team together with Josh Allen's contract? And I would imagine it's not much longer when you've got players coming up on the defensive side of things. Offensively, like, you know, you said they got away from the power running. I don't think they have a good running back, but you can't bring in a Derrick Henry. I don't think that you can. They probably can figure out a way to sign him with the cap, but I think it's definitely closing. I mean, I hate to say it this way because I am a fan of him. I think Sean McDermott has to go. I think we've just seen there's too many instances over the past couple of years where Buffalo gets safe in moments they can't be, especially when you're playing someone like Patrick Mahomes. I mean, if we're also being honest with ourselves, this game is probably not that close if dang it, what's his name? Hardman doesn't fumble that out the back.
I was going to say that fake punt call.
Yeah.
I screamed.
Yeah. So I was listening to it on the coverage. I don't know if you heard what they said. I guess it's because Kansas City had 10 men on the field, so they audible to that. I don't know that Sean McDermott called that. If that's the case, I don't hate it because you can't be mad at Sean McDermott if they audible to it. It's not like they're like signaling to the
But
sideline
you've
that he says,
empowered them that if
yeah,
there's 10 men, you got to know situation
yeah,
ramification.
yeah.
You were
So
pretty deep in your own territory at a pretty brutal part of the game.
it just feels like, and I know it's a little bit different because, Jeff Fisher wasn't in the playoffs. But it's almost the way I would word it is like when they finally got rid of Jeff Fisher as they moved to Los Angeles, they bring in Sean McVay, and all of a sudden that team is, because they didn't change much about that team. And they end up going in and becoming this contender in the NFC. Like, I just think maybe it's one of those things where his voice in that locker room just doesn't command the way it used to. They need something new in there. I don't know. They need to do something because I think they've got maybe 2 years.
Sometimes, for however good a coach is, you just hit a certain plateau. We've seen that historically happen before. Tony Dungy in Tampa Bay. Yes, he later managed to win in Indianapolis, but he took them so far, but they could not get over the hump. And they bring in John Gruden, and with almost exactly the same roster the next year, they win the Super Bowl. Same thing happened in, kind of Philadelphia when they moved out Andy Reid. He had gotten to the NFC Championship a whole bunch of times. Denver, my own team, I saw this happen. John Fox had basically won the division, gotten into the playoffs like every year he was Denver's coach, but he was the head coach the year Peyton Manning set all of those offensive records in 2013, and they lost horrendously in the playoffs. They lost horrendously in the playoffs the next year, and they made the decision to let him go, and Kubiak came in with pretty much the same roster and maybe even a diminished Peyton Manning and was able to get over the hump. I like what Sean McDermott did. He certainly turned things around in Buffalo and made them contenders, but it's almost the same way I feel about Mike McCarthy. I don't care that Mike McCarthy won 12 games 3 years in a row and won the division twice. They can't make a championship game. And I know Buffalo has made the AFC championship game at least once because they lost to the Chiefs in the championship game one of those years. But mostly they've been getting knocked out, wild card, divisional round, and they're these brutal losses. You might be right that there's a certain plateau from which they just can't get over with who they have.
Yeah, and it's hard to blame all of that on McDermott as well, obviously, because the team has been good. And again, you're going up. So you mentioned Tony Dungy. Like I'll equate this to Peyton Manning. You're going up against Bill Belichick and Andy Reid and Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. Like, obviously, we're not pretending that like that is an easy thing to do. But last year, I think because of some of the safe things that they did is why they ended up going into overtime. Obviously, Chiefs get the ball first. Patrick Mahomes drives right down the field, scores, game over, you're out. This year, same thing. I mean, you just mentioned the punt. I actually thought they were really safe toward the end of that drive as well, just trying to get into field goal territory, knowing as they talked all game how bad that wind was. Do you really want to put the game on your field goal kicker dealing with those kind of situations? Like, it's those kind of calls. Like, I get it. If he makes it, you're tied, but you're still taking a shot of being tied going into overtime. Like, you've got to be, if you really want to win it all at times, we see these coaches, even Bill Belichick, you have to be gutsy. You have to go for it. And I think Sean McDermott, again, nothing wrong with it. He's a great coach. You're right. Look what he's done for Buffalo. They will likely build a statue of that man for what he has done for Buffalo, that he has made them a perennial powerhouse in the AFC. But sometimes you just got to make a change and see if it helps. And I think they should. I don't know that they will, but I agree with you. Like, I don't know that anybody has caught up to them. I still think the Dolphins, while I love Mike McDaniels, I think the Dolphins are a little too much show pony and not enough like actual real players like the Buffalo Bills are. I think they're still the class of the division, but Kansas City's caught up to you. Baltimore has caught up. Like, I thought going into last year, Buffalo was by far the best team, and they couldn't get it done. Kansas City's going to be right there. You got Cleveland was
And
really
the
good.
second year in a row they've lost at home in the divisional round when they were because the year before they got waxed by Cincinnati in that
You got
no game.
Cincinnati. I mean, if Joe Burrow is back and healthy, Cincinnati's right there with you. I think you can make an argument. Houston's now not far off from being out there with you. Like, there's no more guarantee, and you have one of the best quarterbacks in all of the NFL. Now, that being said, and you brought up Mike McCarthy, so I'll use this as an example again why I think Sean McDermott has become Mike McCarthy. Because I was talking to somebody about this recently. Look at those Green Bay Packer teams. At times, those Green Bay Packer teams had some of the best defenses and offenses in the entire NFL. And in my opinion, while Tom Brady is the GOAT for winning 7 rings, Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback until Patrick Mahomes came along that I've ever watched play. They won 1 Super Bowl. 1. With Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers. Like, it does take a lot of luck and a lot of things to go your way. But look at what the Packers have done since they got rid of Mike Brown. They really haven't taken any kind of step back with Matt LaFleur. In fact, they almost won a Super. Make it to the Super Bowl with Matt LaFleur. Like, I thought they lost. Did they lose to the Steelers? Was that Matt LaFleur or was that that's still Mike McCarthy? Okay,
yeah,
that's probably
Matt LaFleur had. This is his 5th year. They were 13. They won 13 games 3 years in a row, but I don't think they even.
Yeah, I think they lost.
They lost to the 49ers.
Yeah,
they lost in. Yeah. I think they lost twice to the point. He has not fared well against San Francisco.
I mean, in my opinion, they were the better team. They just couldn't get it done.
But I mean, that's been Buffalo against Kansas City. I mean, you almost have the same situation. Like McCarthy's done it with 2 different quarterbacks.
Yeah. So like that for me, I just think you never want to see anybody besides Brandon Staley and oh god, who was the other coach that I hated? Was with the Panthers this year. For the life of me, can't remember his name.
Frank Reich.
Frank Reich. Besides Brandon Staley and Frank Reich, I've never asked a coach to be fired, and I don't want to see coaches get fired. But like, I think you just need to make a change in Buffalo at this point.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting off season because you mentioned they do have some players that are in contract situations. It's hard. It's been hard for me to tell, especially down the stretch, how Stephon Diggs feels being there. I mean, they keep talking about he's still their number 1 receiver. And yeah, you don't have a lot of other receivers, but does he want to be there? Is it still a good fit? You know, how much of him not having any, he had 10 games to finish the season under 100 yards. How much of that also plays into them not seemingly being on the same page? So yes, go Lions. We'll make our picks a little bit later, but that would certainly be probably the happiest choice of all the 4 teams that are left. That'll do it for today. At least the divisional round was a lot of fun. We will see how the conference championships go. And then, at the Super Bowl, at least we know we're going to get Usher and we're going to get some summer movie blockbuster trailers, such as it is, maybe a Deadpool trailer. I know you will be interested in that.
I would love to see that. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's the only comic book movie coming out this year.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. It's hard to believe.
I know.
Hard to believe. Well, that'll do it for us today. Thanks for tuning in. Back on Friday with picks for the conference championship games. Until then, you can go give us a rate and review and download an episode. And we will see you guys again on Friday. Take it easy.